Welcome, everybody. My name is Joanne Butcher. This is the Filmmakers Life, and welcome to all the filmmakers. Everything that I always talk about is how to move your careers forward as filmmakers. And the idea here is that we'll have more experienced filmmakers on so that you can learn from their journey, even though I have discovered that no journey is the same. No two journeys are the same. And I'm so very excited to introduce you today to my fabulous, fabulous client, Tshego Molete, although she's going to say her name properly. She really really worked hard at trying to get me to pronounce her name correctly, but I failed. So Tshego, welcome all the way from South Africa.
Hi, I'm so sorry. Someone is trying to call me and I just keep declining it, but they keep calling. Hi. Hi, my name is Tshego Molete Khanyile. Yes, Tshego. Yes. How are you, Joanne? How are you? It's been a while.
Very, very well. Very well. It has been a long time. And I am here in Orlando at the International Christian Film and Music Festival.
Oh,
And
interesting.
yes, so I've been very interested in Christian and faith-based films for a while. And two of my clients have films at this festival. And I'll have to call you about this later, but I have a new client in South Africa who's going to make a faith-based film. So I want to introduce.
Oh, great.
But
Yeah, a huge audience for it here. So yeah, good luck.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my first question always that I love to ask is, when did you first know that you were a filmmaker?
That's such an interesting question. That's such an interesting question because I don't know. I think I've discussed this with you, but I sort of fell into filmmaking, right? I was a journalism student, and I think I got disillusioned with journalism because I think I wanted to tell story. I didn't know what to do with myself, and I went to journalism school, and at the end of my journalism degree, I was like, but I don't think I want to be a journalist. I was kind of just doing this because I think I was good at it. I was good at writing,
Right.
and yeah, and I just felt like journalism had so many rules around storytelling. And I suppose, you know, if I'd stuck with it, maybe if you get more established, then you can break the rules and do what you want and make it your own thing. But when I was younger and I was just getting into it, there's like a very set way of like telling a story and how you tell it and what you have to include and blah blah blah. And I just felt kind of disillusioned about a lot of it. And I don't know how, but I find I kind of fell into like an assistant role. And I was first a producer for what are they called? I don't know if it's something that happens in America, but lineups used to be a huge thing in before digital TV. It used to be a huge thing in South Africa where you had to announce on television what was coming up.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Like older people will probably remember this. So the people would announce like
just don't know the name. We don't know. I don't know the name.
yeah. So it's called lineups in the industry, and sort of kind of like in promo producing in that kind of category.
Yes.
But I had to like produce what was basically going to happen on the channel that night, basically.
Wait. So you were in journalism school and you
I
realized,
was
oh,
in
it's
journalism
not for
school.
me.
I don't want to, yeah.
You walked
And
out of the door and walked into a job. What
well,
happened?
I wish it was that easy. I wish I just walked into places. But but basically what happened was I graduated and I had no plan because I didn't want to go because the plan is to go into a newsroom and I was like, I feel like I'm gonna die if I'm in a newsroom. It was that bad. And I'm very grateful for a lot of the skills that I've carried from there, but I
Yes.
just didn't feel like I was meant to be in a newsroom. And this was after, you know, I interned in newsrooms as part of my degree. So I knew what it was about and I didn't want that. And I didn't have a plan because the thing I'd been studying was not what I wanted. So for a few months, I think I was at home, and as things happen, like you meet a person and they're like, oh, you went to the school, that's pretty good, so you should try out for this, it's like a connection thing. And that's
Uh-huh.
always happened in my career, it's always like about people and people like being interested in your story. Like they
Uh-huh.
knew I was from this prestigious journalism school, but I was like, bucking the trend, didn't want to go into journalism. And so this girl that I met randomly one night at a bar was like, oh, we really like graduates from that place. So if you don't want to do journalism, then try out this thing, which was promo producing. And
It's
I went for an interview and they were like, oh, we love you. Let's do this. So then
amazing.
it was crazy. And that was kind of like my first taste of the audiovisual space, because my journalism degree, I'd specialized in writing and editing.
Yes.
There were other specializations. There was television, there was radio, there was digital, but I specialized in writing and editing. But they were like, we know you're from a good school, and we kind of like your vibe, so let's see how this works out. And so for I think a good few months, this was my baptism into like proper employment. It was my early 20s, so you know how that goes. You're just
Uh-huh.
like, on one side, you don't understand the severity of what you're doing because you're young and everything is just, la la la. And on the other hand, you're kind of exploited. So, but you get skills, right? You're pushed and you gain your skills. And I learned about, deadlines and producing and being under pressure and that kind of thing. And that was my first taste of producing. And it was just for lineup. So, I would have to like research what is the channel gonna put on the, what is the channel gonna show, and write a script about it and organize a voiceover artist, and they'll be announcing tonight at 8 p.m. we're going to show this movie, and then we're going to do this, and then there's going to be this game show, and and that was my job. I had to produce that whole entire segment, and that was pretty much my
It's
my
really
introduction.
producing. I mean, that's really
Yeah, it is. It's like the first taste of it, and I just had to learn how to put the pieces together and manage to make it work. Yeah, so that was my first taste of producing. And it was a horrible place of employment, to be honest. But it was my first job. I was very,
so
very
exciting.
proud of myself. I was
I
very proud of
could go
myself and
out
what I
and
was
work in
learning.
lineups.
But it was a horrible place, such a high turnover of employment. No wonder they hired me so easily. I mean, when you're older, you know that, well, if that place of employment is like that, what are the red flags to look out for? But I was fresh out of school. I didn't know. I was so excited to be hired, and I learned a lot from this. So I'm happy. I'm proud of that, but it was a horrible place of employment. So when I got another offer, I jumped a few months later. And I know what they say about millennials, but honestly, it was not a great place. And they went through graduates like this, every few months. It was just like a completely new workplace. So a few months later, I also left. And then I was an assistant to, a girl who worked with me at that same place, had a job offer, but she had another offer and she couldn't take both. So she was like, listen, check this one out. So I checked it out, clicked with the boss, and I became an assistant, a producer's assistant. No,
Wow.
sorry, it was director's assistant.
Uh-huh.
And but she was trying to get into producing. So she was a director, so she had an artist temperament. So that's a very euphemistic phrase. She had an artist temperament. So I ended up having to learn a lot, like on the job, had to learn a lot. Like, I was 23 and I was running like budgets. Had to learn all of that, just pick it up on the fly. I had to learn about how to run productions because, I was working for a person with an artist temperament. So I had to be like the safety net. And so that was like my real baptism of what being a producer.
Wow.
Yeah, so I picked that up as I went along, and I really started to learn about like what it takes to run a production,
Was
like
that
pitching
television
for. Say
still?
that again.
Was that in television still?
It was mostly television, but she mostly directed feature documentaries, but she also did television. So we would pitch at channels, at broadcasters. so I had to learn how to do the budgets for that. She would pitch a lot. So the one thing that I really admired about her was her work ethic. And so I learned a lot from her, being her assistant, about that. And so then I learned about like putting together budgets and preparing pitches and all of that. But you know, like an artist temperament can wear on you. So emotionally, I had to.
You know, this is a
when I
very
had to.
amazing thing you're bringing up, the artist temperament. And one of
Yeah.
my stories is I was making this PSA and I had something like 30 kids who were going to be in the piece. And that means, therefore, there are 60 parents there, you know.
Yeah.
And we were going to shoot from something like 9 to 1, and I had food there and different things. And the DP showed up an hour late.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
when he showed up, I was like, you know, what the hell? And he said, I'm an artist.
Uh,
And I never forgot
Look,
it.
a lot of people use that as an excuse. If you're lucky, they have the chops to back it up. But a lot
Uh-huh.
of the time, they're just taking the Mickey, really, they
Yeah,
are.
yeah. But they
And
don't
but
realize. They don't
yeah,
realize. And it's
the
interesting because
impact, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
you're
Impact.
a real producer, and I work with a lot of writer directors who are also producers, but you're a real producer. I'm a real producer. And
Mm,
and it's interesting because this topic doesn't come up very much, but a lot of artists don't realize how very, very difficult that they are to
mm,
work.
mm, mm.
They don't realize
Yeah.
it.
Look, it's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, right now, as part of like my repertoire of things I do as a producer, is I run a producing training program,
Uh,
um, which is for very, very entry level producers, but a module that I do concentrate on because I find that no one warned me as a producer that was up and coming, is how
mm,
to deal with the talent, right?
mm,
The fact that a lot of the times, if you're sitting at a table with deal makers, they don't want the talent there because I know they get very emotional. And so they want someone who can be objective and can talk properly. I mean, not like you're not invested as a producer in the project, but you know, there's just another level of like having to deal with emotions. And so, but then how you have to take that on, how you have to basically be a psychologist, you have to be a therapist for the talent, you know, your actors, your writers, your directors, everyone is just like, I have the vision. And you're just like, okay, but can we make this vision work? Like, is it going to be reality? And
uh-huh.
so like, let's work together. How you have to, the way you have to show up, but also how you have to take care of yourself because it wears a lot. It
Yes.
wears on, yeah, it wears a lot on you as a producer. So that is part of what I talk about. I touch on that as in my program. But yeah, so going back to my
Yes.
journey, yeah, going back to my journey coming up. So I was working with this, I was working as a director's assistant and learning a lot, but it was wearing on me emotionally because it was just very volatile, emotionally and in other ways that it impacted. And so I got a job again. The person who I replaced, who was leaving her as a previous assistant, was like, hey, there's this other opportunity. So what I'm trying to highlight here also is how this is a people's game, right?
Yes.
The connections that you make are how you move forward. And it took me a while to realize that pattern, but it really is true. And so a lot of my huge advancements were because I'd worked with people and they remembered me. They remembered me and my work ethic and how we gelled or whatever. And she remembered me and she was like, I know I left you in this mess because she didn't warn me enough about what I was walking into. But here's this opportunity, and it was to replace her because she had to go home. She was an American girl in South Africa, and she had to go home to the US. And she had been working as the assistant script supervisor on District 9, which is
Ah.
huge. Yeah, so that was my introduction to feature sets, to set life, you know, feature, because I've been dealing with television, I've been dealing and more smaller television projects, so you know, documentary series or educational series, and feature documentaries. And so this was like feature, you know, it was a Sony project, it was huge. It was, yeah,
I
it was the
go back
works.
to something you said, because everything you're saying is just so interesting, but this thing you were saying about connections, you know,
Yes.
and this whole industry is about that. But
Yeah.
but the other side of that is that once somebody sees somebody like you who is really together and making things happen, then yes, you're going to keep getting jobs.
Mm.
Because the truth is that people like you are rare, very rare.
Uh, yeah.
I'm sure you see that with your producer training program, but
Yeah. Yeah.
people have an idea, they want to do it, but it doesn't mean to say that they can, you know,
Yeah. Or
and
that they're willing to put the work in, pretty
mhm.
much. Yeah. Yeah. It
And just
is.
today, I was talking on my high school careers day,
Oh,
my high
wow.
school faculty, and they were asking me about, what is a producer? And it's like, that's a very hard thing to describe, because being a producer means you're sort of taking care of everything, you know,
Yes.
so much
Yes.
problem solving. It's so much
Mm.
about taking initiative, and most
Yeah.
people will not take initiative.
Oof. It's a tough one that you're saying, Joanne. It's a really tough one because a lot of people have ideas, but I mean, are those ideas going to become reality? And you listen to me talking now, and it seems like I've had it all, but I've also been that person that's kind of like scared. And I've come across people like that who have had like a lot more experience than me. So say they've been like, PMing or line producing for like years.
Yeah,
And you're just like, but you have the skills, you've got the technical skills, you've done bigger projects than me, you've done it before. But there's that innate belief in like, I'm going to lead my own project, because it is a very different
very different.
that step that you take between I'm PMing for someone or line producing, let's say line producing, because you're in a more of a, you're more of an authority and you're running budgets and you're kind of like making sure like everything happens. But that leap from you line producing and then going on to produce your own thing, like lead a production, right? And even that leap from being a producer for hire for someone else's company, where it's not your name on the line, pretty much. I mean, maybe your name, but it's not your company. If everything like hits a wall tomorrow, it's not like your house that's getting repossessed. It's not, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Um, there's a huge leap up, and it's even maybe, I don't want to say physically, even sort of practically, it's maybe not a huge step, but psychologically, it can be a huge step.
Psychologically.
And there's kind of like the belief that you have to have in the fact that you can lead your project. You can lead a project, you can see it from inception or conception to finish, to seeing it on a big screen. And maybe the only thing, not even skill, not even experience, but literally the only thing driving you is like, I have to see this on a big screen. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if you have that drive, you're probably more experienced than someone who's been producing forever, but it's
yeah.
not their project. You know what I mean? If you can make that happen, it's leaps and bounds ahead of people that have kind of like got the skill, slicker with it now. They've got the sort of but if someone had to be like, okay, produce a 5 minutes, story about your mom, like just do your thing now, and it's about you and it's your thing, they would probably fall apart, because
Yes,
now it's your
yes,
story. You
yes.
have to lead. You're a
Everything you're
company.
saying is so great.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
interviewed you right when you got on the set of District 9, which is one of
Yes.
my
Okay.
all-time favorite films.
It's an amazing film. When we heard about it, when we got into set, we didn't know anything about it. We just knew it was like it was also such an interesting dynamic, because the director was very young, right? Neil Blomkamp. It
Yeah,
was his first huge feature, and he just had the backing. He had a great concept, and he had done a short that was similar, and Peter Jackson was like backing him. So it was him. He was like 29, 30, and everyone around his age were assistants. So we were like all assistants. It was so interesting. Like, he's the head of this like whole vision. And then everyone his age is like an assistant to an assistant or whatever. Like feature film sets are like intense with the hierarchy. So it was so interesting, but it was also so inspiring, right? It's like, if you can do it, then you can do it also. And it doesn't matter. You don't have to have been there for 50 years, you know? So most of the HODs were like much older because this is like a very important um, project. And I don't know if you're aware of how the industry works in South Africa, because a lot of our huge sort of international projects happen in Cape Town.
Uh-huh.
And because Cape Town is kind of like the servicing capital of our and so they're used to kind of like the big names coming through and servicing those kind of projects. But the film was very specifically set in Johannesburg. And so it was like one of the first, and Johannesburg is kind of like showing its own now. It is like stepping up as a location now, but before it always used to just be Cape Town. And so we had the like these big names in industry, sort of, you know, are used to working with like big like studios with HBO and like names that we never come across in Johannesburg. In Johannesburg, we deal with like television, and
Uh-huh.
it's usually like South African products, you know, and South
Yes.
African features. And so they're much smaller than what. So it was a very interesting dynamic. And the fact that he was like he's Canadian, but then he grew up in he's born and grew up in went to school in South Africa and then went away, and he wanted to set a story in Johannesburg. And so it was such a huge like opportunity for all of us, you know, even if you were an assistant, it was like, this never comes to Johannesburg. And so we all kind of made it our own. And so that was my first taste of like the feature film set life. And you know, seeing like Neil Blomkamp, he was like 29, 30. I was, I think, 24, 25. And it was just like this guy's leading this whole production. Are you crazy? Like, this is amazing, you know, this is inspiring. And
What a
so,
story. What a story.
yeah, it was just amazing to be part of. And such a crazy story also, not your usual, you know, like the random, yeah, you know what I mean? The cookie cutter story. This was very different. And so it was all like part of my come up and the things that like stay with you as you kind of mold yourself and think about what you want to do in the future. And so after that, that was kind of like my first introduction to um freelancing. So then after that, I was like, I don't know if I can, especially after my like stints in the unstable, emotionally unstable places.
Right.
I don't know. I was like, I don't know if I can do full-time employment. And so then I started being a freelancer, which is very tough, you know, anywhere in the world you go, especially in the visual sector, freelancing is really tough. And so it's about like making your name and people remembering how you worked, and you're only as good as your last job, right? And so that's when I started freelancing, but at the same time, then started producing on the side. So I started on small things like producing music videos, um, you know, on the weekends, you like during the week, you're wherever you're working wherever you're working, and on the weekend you're organizing, sort of getting that skill of organizing things like, okay, all crew, we're not paying people, but we have to make sure that all crew is on set on a Sunday at 5 a.m., you know, making sure that that happens. And you have like your gear and you're negotiating because you don't have a budget. You're negotiating with like the Jenny guy. He like, you know, works on film sets, but like on Sunday, the generator is kind of sitting idle and maybe he's not going to tell his boss, but he'll be on set with the Jenny, like just negotiating and making sure that things happen, right? And then, you know, always negotiating with like friends that work at a post house, you know, is there downtime on a post on like one of the editing machines? Can we slot in there, you know? But it gives you the skill of like when you have your production, and you're not going to land into a big job first. You'll start off with small jobs, and so that negotiating skill is very important. So going from zero to like 10,000 good, and then maybe 100,000, and then, you know, in a while you'll see your first million. And so, you know, no one is going to give you like a 10 million job. It's like, oh, I'm a producer here, please can you produce my 10 million project?
Oh my God.
So,
Just had that
yeah.
conversation with somebody, and it's so hard for filmmakers to wrap their brains around you're not going to start at $10 million.
No, yeah. So, I mean, so that's kind of like the ascension. And so maybe it's not necessarily how it's been for everyone, but it's followed the same kind of themes, I think, for a lot of the producers that I've met, that have stayed the course pretty much, you know. And it's not to say that it gets better after you've done your first big job, because then, you know, life's. It's my new saying. It's like life is lifing.
Life.
And so you have your like you've got a decent budget and you produce something, you've got your name and you're like, yeah, I produced this. This is amazing. And then there's a quiet time, and then it's just like, okay, am I going to line produce for someone else? Am I production managing for other jobs? You know what I mean? And for a lot of people, I know in South Africa, it's so interesting. People are very caught up in titles, whereas I've met, maybe not American, but maybe in the US, I'm not sorry, in America, US, maybe European, where like they don't care. Like, okay, in the next 2 months, then I'm gonna production coordinate, even going a step further down. Like, I'm doing this thing, I'm coordinating this thing, then I'm producing, you know, in 6 months, and this is my own project that I'm producing. But then like another 3 months later, then I'm gonna, you know, production manage. And you just have to, first of all, look after yourself, because if you can't maintain yourself, then this is just like the most expensive hobby.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. You
It's
have to be able
so,
to take care of,
yeah, you have to be able to
still have
maintain
to
yourself.
pay bills.
Yeah, you have to pay the bills.
When did
And
you, or did you have an experience of making your first feature? Because I'm hearing you working for other people, but when I met
yeah,
you were making your own projects.
yes. Okay. So so what happened after is that, then because I was like doing my own thing on the side, but still working with other people, then I pitched for a huge project. You know, I'd done, okay, before the huge project, I'd done other mid-sized projects. So we, a little bit different to the US, we have a national funder. So more similar to like the European system. We
Right.
have a national funder, and sometimes, and you know, you can apply to them for funding as part of like your finance plan. But they also occasionally have special projects. So they'll be like, okay, it's been, so this year for us, it's 30 years of democracy. So we'll probably like put out a call out and say, if you have a project that speaks to this, you know, can you pitch for that?
Right.
And so one of the ones that I pitched for was 40 years since the 1976 uprising. So this is a seminal event in South African history.
And world
And
and
yeah,
world history.
and yes, yeah. And so kind of truly showed what was going on in the country in 1976. And so, you know, there was this huge uprising with school children, literal school children. So like the first person that died was a 12 or 13-year-old. And so, you know, like kids, like literal kids were martyrs, basically fighting against the apartheid system. And because they had wanted to introduce Afrikaans as like a medium of instruction in schools, but also had like the special education system for Black people called Bantu education that was literally meant to just make sure that they come into the job market as just servers, right?
Right.
And so you're not going to teach kids mathematics, you're not going to teach them science, you're just going to teach them how to like garden and, you know, do washing kind of thing, you know. So that was
Right.
the philosophy behind it. And so they were fighting against that, and it just turned into a bloodbath. And so it was a very seminal moment in history for us, and showing the world, and I think it just showed the world what was going on here.
Right.
And we made a documentary about it because it happened 40 years since then. And so that documentary was amazing, was quite successful. It was like one of my first individual, as a individual producer, one of like my initial calling cards. And so
Mhm.
it was a decent budget. It wasn't like massive, but it was like one of my first like proper budgets where I was like, oh, I really am working and I don't have to negotiate too much. And this is great, you know. And from then that was kind of like that started how it helped my company be
Huh.
known as like you know, so it was me and my company and we're producing stuff.
Yes.
And from there, then another call out came out. So every couple of years they have a call out for a women's production company. So basically a production company run by women to run a slate of short films, training and then producing short films over a period of 3 years. So this was like amazing because this allows your company also to establish, it allows it to establish itself, and then it allows you to stabilize as a producer, especially someone who's like a freelancer, right? And so this was like, I can't even tell you like what it did for my company and for me as a producer, like putting you to the next level, you
Yeah.
know. And so when I met you, that's what I was working on. That's what I was doing. I was running this training program, but at the same time also producing the short films that I trained these women directors to make. And so that was like by all accounts, it was a very decent budget. But then I also went and raised more funds from the different kind of like funding. So I kind of like gathered a pot of funding that was like very generous. And so also this is, you know, my education in independent producing and raising different funds and not just relying on like kind of like one funder, and then also training other people, because when you teach other people you also learn, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So gathering a team to train these as like mid-career female film practitioners, so they would be in other areas of filmmaking. And so the reason why the National Film Funder had this was because there's this research that they'd done about why there's a lack of female directors, you know, or specifically in South Africa, but I think this can apply in
Yeah, yeah,
other areas.
absolutely.
um yeah, so there's a lack of female directors, and you would find an equal amount of women and men in sort of first year film school, and they're all doing directing, but by the time they graduate, it's mostly men that are doing that are directing. And then even beyond that, even if it was women and men, if they were equal at the end of film school, then a lot of the women would naturally take up the role. They would step outside of the role of directing. If they were kind of like in a team, then the woman would suddenly more naturally take up the organization roles. So, you know, the men would be left to be the visionaries and kind of the artists, and the women would have to be like the producers. And so, you know, there was a lot of research that went into it, into why this was necessary. And so this the slate program was an answer to that. So people that have been in the industry, so it was very, very specific how it was targeted. It was women that have been in industry already, minimum of 2 years, had found themselves in other roles, but had always wanted to direct, and so this was their chance. And
Nice.
so
And you
yeah
ended up with 30 of those short films.
yeah, so we ended up with 30. So every year we would produce 10,
Yeah.
and then of course in the middle of it we had the pandemic, you know,
Yes.
so then it kind of there was a lot of like yeah, juggling. And then we had to it ended up being more than 3 years, but basically at the end of it, with 30 short films, and had trained 30 first-time female directors. And it
And
was amazing. A lot of them, like the number of female directors in South Africa has gone up, shot up because of the slate. And
mm,
you know, most of them are absorbed by advertising, but then quite a few, you know, have gone to start directing huge Netflix series, you know, like Blood and Water, and you know, like these big name series. A lot of them have gone into directing feature films, you know, and it was so pitiful before
Yeah.
this program started. It was so pitiful, the number of like female directors, you know, and at
You've
the end of it,
changed the face of
like,
the industry.
yeah, I'm so proud of that. I'm so proud of it to be part of this program, you know, because it's not an anomaly anymore to be a female
Right.
director, and especially because they've kind of been absorbed into advertising. So the language of advertising changes, you know, and also the way um treatment on sets, you know, there's an awareness of how people are treated on sets, because if the head of the set, you know, is a woman, and there's kind of like a pervasive
Yeah.
uh, attitude towards women, then there's like an extra thought about the way you treat the woman on set, you know. And not to say that it's all hunky-dory now, but
No,
it's a lot better. It's a lot better than it used to be.
that's
And
great.
so, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, to
So
have.
I'm so happy about that. Yeah.
And then the one thing that I know for sure that you have done since then is you got into the EAVE program, European,
Yes.
I can't remember,
Uh,
audio visual
Yes.
something.
Something. But
That experience, how was that?
it was amazing. So, you know, once I finished the female filmmaker slate, um, I was a little bit lost because, you know, for 5 years I had like a very specific, you know, because I was working with you, I was producing I was kind of developing other things on the side, but I had this main project, you know. Um, and so then I felt like I was at a crossroads with my journey as a producer, and you know, how was I going to approach producing, and what was I going to produce? You know, what was I working on? How would I put them together? Um, Also very important, which is a huge part, because I entered EAVE
Yeah,
as
babe.
yes, EAVE. Yeah, it
E-
is. It's a
yeah,
very interesting. Yeah. I entered because they have two streams. You either enter with a project, so you're there developing a project, or you enter as a career participant, which I really liked, and it's not something that you find a lot. First of all, producer programs are so
right,
few in the
right,
world, because they usually, a lot of the development programs are targeted at like directors or
correct.
writers.
Mm,
Yeah. And so first of all, just the fact that it exists is an amazing thing.
yeah,
And then secondly, that they have the stream where you go just as a person who wants to develop yourself as a producer, as opposed to you want to go there to develop like a project, you know. And so that was very interesting. A lot of sessions around like you and your company, and how do you develop, like, what's your development policy? So you have to develop stuff, knowing that in the cycle of a project's life, the development is very tricky. Development part is very tricky. But this is where a lot of the kind of, what can I say, the basis of the project is laid, you know? And so how do you manage all of that? How do you manage having less
oh,
of an income? Yeah. How do you manage having less of an income, but like having to make sure and see through this thing, so that it can be viable and make money for you and your company later on. And so there was a lot around that, and it was an amazing experience. And I think, going back to what we were talking about earlier, the most important thing that it did was setting up your network. And for me, so I think what they're looking for is, as you're developing as a producer, you know, developing as a producer who's going to start working internationally. And that's where that was the crossroads I was at. So understanding the international production landscape, producing landscape, and then the connections that you make, right? So there's producers from all over Europe, and then they have I think a percentage internationally. So producers from Asia, producers from other African countries, producers from the US and South America, and your network. And so we still have a WhatsApp group now.
Uh-huh.
Anyone sort of, so first of all, now attending international markets is a lot less daunting because you have people that you're going
Oh,
like
yeah.
every.
Yeah.
So Cannes is coming now, so the WhatsApp group is like very lit now, like who's going to be in Cannes? I'm going to be here for these and these dates, like can we get together, let's have drinks, let's do this, let's do that. So there's just the human connection, there's that, right? So you're going to Cannes, you're going to Rotterdam, you're going to Berlin, and there's people to meet, there's like human faces to connect with. um and then following that, there's the connections that those human faces come with. It's like, oh, there's first of all just the knowledge, right? It's like, oh, I'm shooting in like, someone recently was saying that they're going to shoot like in snowy conditions in the top of a mountain. I mean, it's outside of my skill set because I'm in South Africa. It's like, I'm never going to produce that, but it's interesting to see the people talk about it. Like, oh, I'm in the Pyrenees or in the Alps or whatever. And it's just like, we have to shoot like snowy scenes, who has done this? How did it go for you? And so then they trade, tips on how they made it work, or that kind of thing. And so there's that, just like picking each other's brains over like,
Nice.
I'm applying for this fund, guys, have you ever applied for it? Please, can you tell me how it went and what are they looking out for and what do I need to look out for?
Fantastic.
So there's that kind of information. And then there's the connections, right? There's the connections, like you want to do a co-production with France. Now people in France,
Yeah.
which is very hard. So, I don't know if it's the same in the US, but in South Africa, we feel very far from the rest of the world. Just geographically, we're just kind of like very far. We're like at the bottom of the African continent, and it's just kind of like hard to make connections, and so it's so that like a lot rides on us going to co-production markets, but then a lot of the times you're kind of going in blind and you don't know people, and so you have to like rely on sort of like other connections. But if you have like an established connection and human faces behind it, like, oh, I know these people that are doing this project, and if you want to get on it, then here's their contacts. Or I know a person, I know people at that what is it called, that sales agency, and this is how my experience went, and you can talk to this person for your project. And so that kind of human connection, and I think that's been the most invaluable for me.
Yes.
A network is very, very important, and at this point, like a professional network is kind of one of your assets that you have in your back pocket as a producer.
Mm-hmm.
But also at the same time, while all of that stuff is going on, then there's also um just unburdening yourself as a producer, knowing that you're not alone.
Yeah, yeah. And the other
We
people
had
who
literal,
that,
yeah, we had literal like therapy sessions, just being like, guys, I'm in this situation. So as part of our session was like sit there with like a mentor and be like, I'm facing this project and I'm in this project and I'm facing these problems. And then people would kind of like chime in. But some of the times it's personal. It's like, people telling us about like how being a producer is impacting on their family life, and how,
right.
and maybe they just need other people to talk to. Someone
Fantastic.
who's in the same, yeah, someone who's in the same, like you're an independent producer, and that's tough anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world, you can be in Sweden with the most amazing kind of like
Support
funding
and
setup,
fun.
or you can
Good.
be in the
Yeah.
US where it's completely independent, or you can be in Asia where it's just like go, 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 or you can be in Africa, and an African country where there's no funding. It's
Right.
just tough everywhere. And so just sitting down and being like, yo, guys, like, okay, I have a husband and some kids, and and I have to do this and this and that, and then there's work, and my issues with like crew members, and it's just like people will be like, oh my god, you're not going mad, it is tough.
And just
You are going mad. It is mad. It is mad.
just to close, what projects are you working on now?
So right
I
now,
I
yeah,
always remember I had to get you to put them in a spreadsheet because there were so many.
yeah. I think
Last
also
one, please.
no, the first thing I had to learn also was how to not overburden my plate. Like I'm dishing out too much on my plates and just like what is really viable.
Yes.
Quite a lot of them I had to put on the back burner. But right now, I am in a development pre-production, I would say actually pre-production on a feature film
Uh-huh.
with Showmax, which is amazing. So one of the directors that was on my slate that I trained in the second year of my slate approached me about doing a an adaptation of her short film, the short film that we produced. And you know, we pitched it, we got greenlit for Showmax, and then the channel decided that it wasn't really what they wanted. There was too many, so we had to change our project basically on the fly to be like, okay, so can we take that one back and pitch this other one to you? And that was greenlit. And so right now we're yeah, so we'll be shooting in July. And it needs to be, it's very, very insane deadlines, but it needs to be done, I think, by the end of September. Yeah, no, it's insane. But it should be on Showmax soon. And then I am in development on 3 other features, which I'm busy applying for funding for, and hoping to shoot one next year. One of them next year and the other one the following year. So
Are you still working
learning.
on documentary?
Yes, I am working on documentary, though I am focusing a lot more on feature now, but I am occasionally I do do documentary.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I have to go because I am supposed to be in a workshop at the festival about distribution, but what a pleasure to catch up and hear what you're working on. It's just fantastic to see you. And
Yes.
and as I said, I've got a couple of introductions I want to make. I have another client who's planning on making a film in South Africa, and then I have this
Oh, okay.
in South Africa who's, so I have some introductions I want to make. And but I thank you so much, and we have to keep in touch. And you know, anytime you want to complain about an artistic temperament, just what's that?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Joanne. I'm so sorry about the time. I honestly thought it was like an hour later. So
We
yeah,
got it all sorted out. We got it all sorted out. So
yeah, yeah.
but thank you again so much. Thank you everybody for coming and listening,
Thank
and
you. Thanks, everyone.
Really great to hear your story. Thank you, Joanne.
Thank
See you.
you. Thanks.
bye everybody. Thank you, Emily.
Bye.